Good evening and welcome to the September 10th, 2014 work session of Richmond Community Schools Board of School Trustees. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now we will have the reading of our mission statement, please.
That's me. Richmond Community Schools guide students on pathways of learning to a future of limitless possibilities.
Thank you, Kelly. And now the reading of our mission statement.
Richmond Community Schools, a community nurturing mind, body, and spirit to prepare students for lives of choice, purpose, and service.
Thank you, Susie. And now we are ready for our showcase video.
I would set the pace here for it, but it speaks for itself.
Okay.
One of the major departments is our Department of Special Education. Also, I serve as the coordinator of Student Health Services, which is over the nurses and immunizations. And then I also serve as a district person over RTI PBIS. Department of Special Education, we have teachers in each of our buildings throughout the district. And special ed teachers, we have around 85. And then we also have our paraprofessionals who assist our students in the classrooms. Then we also have special services, I call them itinerant services. They are teachers, specialists really, in the district that provide services for like our low vision blind students. We also have a physical therapist that's on staff. We have OTAs, which are occupational therapist assistants that provide occupational therapy. We have our speech and language pathologists, school psychologists that also do testing and any type of referrals to see if they're eligible for special education. I have an IEP here in Richmond Community Schools. IEP is an individual educational program, and it is devised. We have a case conference once a student is referred for testing, and the testing proves that they're eligible to receive services. We have a case conference, and we develop this individual plan for the student according to their eligibility and disability. And that usually is like a general ed teacher that's involved in this case conference. The parents are also involved, a special ed teacher, the principal, it could be a counselor that's available during that time. And we look at what kind of services we can provide in order to assist the student to be successful in their grade level. And I will say that 85% of our students who have IEPs are out there in the general ed classroom, and our general ed teachers work very hard with our special ed teachers to combine services and consultation and to figure out how can they achieve in the classroom with the gen ed curriculum. A teacher is under the service of deaf and hard of hearing, and along with those services that she provides to our students who are eligible in that disability, we have 3 interpreters in our district that provide sign language services for the students that are out in the gen ed population, and the interpreter goes into the classroom and uses sign language to interpret to the student what the teacher is saying, and then our interpreter there to assist that deaf student. We also have our life skills program, and we're very rare to have such a large population, but also to provide the services. So we have a primary services out at Crestdale. We have 3 classrooms of life skills students. We have the hybrid program. We also have 3 teachers there that provide life skills program for our intermediate level, and then also our high school students. And at the high school, it's a little bit different because the students are actually able to earn a certificate of completion But after they finish that at the age of 18, they're allowed to come back and stay till they're 22. And Mrs. Crow is kind of over that program where they go out and they do vocational training. So they're on jobs that are out in our Richmond community. So it also provides them skills they can take beyond the high school level.
Okay, we are now ready to celebrate the joy of learning.
We have several items to talk about tonight. One would be our Boston Run Walk. Mrs. Bergdahl, you want to talk about that just briefly?
Yes, tomorrow we will have the Boston Run and Walk. And the walk part is, last year we incorporated our parents with the 3rd and 4th graders that are participating. And so it will be at the Glenn Miller Golf Course area. All the schools will be there participating. The agenda for the walk is at your seat. Mrs. Andrews has been a very, she's over this event, and she decided since it's September the 11th, we should also have some type of ceremony that would commemorate the 9/11 incident. So we're having some students from the choir, Richmond High School Choir, to sing. Also, I believe a trumpeter that will be there to do the Star Spangled Banner, do the pledge. I've also asked the RHS cross-country team to come and assist the 3rd and 4th graders on the course, and they were there last year and did a very nice job. So we're looking forward to this event tomorrow, and it starts around 2:50, and the girls' race starts at 3:10, and then shortly after that, the boys will race.
That's one event. Now, tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock at the high school is opening its time capsule commemorating the 75th anniversary of the opening of Richmond High School as it now stands. And this would be in the main hall, that front hall, tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Now, at your places, or I shouldn't, let me stop there for a second. We have also been given, courtesy of Dean Stevens, a flash drive he sent over here that has the Palladium item from 1939 as it was commemorating the opening of the Richmond High School building. And so I'll be making sure that all of you have a copy of that, at least on your emails. You can open that and peruse it and expand the pictures. They are interesting to see. But I also want to highlight Dean Stevens, who is a staff member over at the high school and who worked with me on the 50-year high school class reunion last Saturday. And the students from the class of '64 could not have been more complimentary of the condition of the building. They noted that they recognized much of it. It hadn't changed in some ways, but they also noted the improvements. But the improvements didn't take away from the character, the historical character of the building. They were very complimentary. At your place also is a Star Jeanette Walk of Fame Richmond Music Festival agenda. And this goes from Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And why would I put that out there to promote? And the fact is, Richmond High School is one of the sponsors of this festival. And they're one of the sponsors of the festival because, in many ways, the legacy of music was based at Richmond High School with its first-in-the-nation high school orchestra and continuing emphasis on music. So that just starts the highlights, I suppose, of what we have to talk about, but that's what I'm bringing to the table tonight.
Lots to celebrate and to highlight. Anyone else have anything? Aaron?
Also on this weekend, Richmond High School and Civic Hall specifically will be involved with hosting segments of our Regional Neighborhood Network Conference that is going on. There will be about 400 people from around the Midwest coming as we discuss neighborhood issues. The venues will be going on. We will also be participating, celebrating the Walk of Fame, the musical, but also one of the areas is we're going to, some of the people will have the opportunity to visit Richmond High School, the facilities here and everything, and see the advantages of having an art museum, a performing arts facility, and everything else in our community. So.
Great. Okay, we are ready now for our first public commentary. Do we have anyone signed up to speak this evening?
We do. We have Brett Guiley.
Brett is not here right now.
Okay.
Okay. Anyone else?
I wonder how he signed up. Did he call?
No, I signed up for it.
Oh,
That's proper procedure or not.
oh, okay. Then Rick Fletcher. Okay.
I would just ask, we're here to talk about.
Could you please state your name?
Oh, yes, my name is Rick Fletcher. Thank you for having me.
Good
I would
evening.
just ask that, I know there's another commentary period, and I'm going to be discussing the policy 2265. I'm wondering if it'd be more proper if I comment at that time.
Whatever you prefer to do.
I would like to do that if that would be okay.
That would be fine.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh. Anyone else?
No, that's all.
Okay. We will move on to consent items.
We have two items tonight for request for approval, and that would be the approval of our minutes and recommendation from Human Resources. And as it stands, there are no addenda tonight to accompany that, so it would be those two items.
Okay.
So moved.
Motion made by Jeff Slifer, seconded by Susie Hively. Comments or questions? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Now we're ready for reports, discussion topics.
Mrs. Bergdahl.
Thank you, Dr. Boroff. This evening, I'm going to do a short, after the video that you heard the information, a short PowerPoint. And then I have two of my specialists that are here this evening that would like to do a simulation with all of you. And I'm sure you have your materials at your seat. Brenda Lennington is here, and she is our deaf and hard of hearing teacher, or teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing. And we have Shelley Meyer, who is our teacher of our low vision and blind students. So they will be doing a presentation shortly after mine. So the first information here that I'd like to present is, of course, our this just gives you an idea of our special ed teachers, that they are licensed, they're very highly qualified. You know, they've gone to school a lot, and they have the specialty area. And then, like I just explained, we do have our specialists that really have concentrated their education in a certain area, and like the low vision blind, deaf and hard of hearing, a physical therapist, occupational therapist, speech and language, and school psychologist. And I talked to Dr. Boroff in the past that we are very fortunate that we have all of those positions filled, and we can provide services for our students that have other disabilities other than just the academic pieces. Our enrollment at this time is 1,057 students. And I put 90% on there because our life skills area is about 100 students this year. Now that number will go up by our December 1 count, and I'll explain to you how that happens in just a few minutes. We also have a teacher that's out in the private school area, the non-public schools, and we provide consultation services as far as the academic part, but our speech and language, our PT, and our OT specialists also serve students with disabilities, and that's 48 at this time. This is our organizational chart. I told Dr. Boroff I couldn't put pictures of all the teachers like we have on the past organizational charts, but you can see there that I still have Mrs. Campbell, who's my assistant, Mrs. Young and Mrs. Jaco, she's our secretary over at Special Services, and she's really in charge of all of our records. If you've been in special ed and you have an IEP, your record is probably your C1, and all their information, case conferences are in those files. Her job is when our students transferred either in and out, she is the keeper of those records. And at the beginning of the year and usually at the end of the year, it's a pretty busy time trying to get all those records that are current. Also have Mrs. Wolf, who is one of our new principals this year at the CYS, the Community Youth Services Building. And under her is Margaret Wilson, her secretary, and we put Vicki Sane there. She's our behavioral specialist. So you can see how the boxes kind of line up. We have our principals who are all in charge of all the special ed teachers in their buildings and the numbers. We try to have, according to the number of students who have IEPs, that's the number of special ed teachers we try to provide in that building. So you will see different numbers according to a different amount of caseloads that are in the buildings itself. Crestdale is one of our larger elementary buildings, has a lot of special ed, a lot of services there, and then also Dennis and Test, and then the high school. Over on the side, you're going to see the itinerant staff. We've already kind of talked about them, how they serve the entire district out into providing services for our students. One of our teams that we have out there, and I believe Dr. Parker will be very aware of this team. This is our preschool team, and it consists of our speech and language pathologist, a preschool education special ed teacher, and our educational diagnostician. And what they do is once a month they receive referrals for students that from First Steps that may be referred that would have a disability. So really by this time until December, they're very busy screening and evaluating these students. And last year they did about 85 of those meetings and referred those students so that they would receive services. So that 1,057 students that we have present at this time, that number will go up due to those evaluations and referrals for special ed services. The same issue comes with our speech and language pathologists. They will be having students referred to them by teachers or kindergarten teachers or principals saying, you know, we believe that they might need services. So it's a busy time for our teams that are out doing screening and evaluations, because that number goes on our December 1 count in order for us to get federal funding. The school psychologists are also the same. They go by the referrals that they receive from case conferences, parent requests, or from the principals. Our life skills program, I know that you've had several presentations from some of our life skill teachers or our students themselves, and I explained on the video that the students are able to stay till they're 22. One of the things I wanted to present to you tonight that might be something you don't know is that there are over 20 colleges throughout the United States that are now providing programs for students to go on to the college level that may have a cognitive disability. They may be severe autistic, of course, deafness, blindness, and so I think there was a story last spring of a student that was out east, and all of his friends were going to go to college. He had been a manager for the football team and the other sports team. He was a Down syndrome student, and he just could not understand why he could not go to college when all of his other friends were going to college. So his parents and one of the coaches found out that Clemson University actually has a program for cognitive disabled students to attend. It's a 2-year program. They go and learn independent skills, job skills, so they can go out and provide, support themselves independently. And they learn about budgeting and all different kinds of skills. So we're seeing that that's being opened up for a lot of our students that have been in our programs. So, I just don't want you to think that just our life skill programs ends at the high school, because there are other programs for them out there once they leave our building. And then we have the Community Youth Services Building, and this is the CYS building at the Baxter. And 2 years ago, we tried to incorporate not only our students that are placed there with their IEPs due to maybe a more restrictive setting, but we are now taking the gen ed students, and part of that is so that if they are up for expulsion, they can go there, continue their education, earn their credits, and graduate. So that's helped us a lot to have that program there. And then the last part, I've worked with Mr. Connington and also with Mrs. Scalf. Part of our program is provided funding through our grants that we write. The large grant is the federal grant for our students from 3 to 21, and then our preschool grant that's from 3 to 5. Our annual pupil count that I was just talking about, the December 1 count, is very important because not only do we receive funding for the students we have in special ed, but there's a different funding level for each student that has a different disability. So the more severe special ed student, we receive more money. Students that receive speech services probably receive the least amount of money. And then also Richmond Community Schools, it's called the Memorandum of Effort. They provide the rest of our funding because we are not self-sufficient in our department. And I work very closely with Mrs. Scalf to see what other services they can provide through the general fund. So that's just kind of overall. I know all of you have been a part of the special ed department information in the past, and I thought tonight it might be a little different to have 2 teachers come and do a simulation. So at this time, are there any questions that you want to ask me, Kelly?
How do we compare, do you know how we compare to the other school districts in the state, our size as far as IEPs? It seems like we,
You mean by our services or enrollment?
by our services, say percentage-wise.
If we're comparing ourselves to like Muncie or Kokomo, Anderson, I believe they have about the same amount of services that we provide. The students that attend maybe a smaller corporation, because we meet with those directors once a month, they're the ones that really may not have an opportunity to have a physical therapist, occupational therapist, but what they do is contract between other corporations, and they try to share that person.
I guess my question was, and I didn't
Sorry.
spell it out, all right, just didn't say it very well, was the percentage of students with IEPs
Okay.
compared to other school districts. How do we compare to?
We used to have one of the highest
Right.
percentages. We do not anymore, I don't believe. Matter of fact, when we were looking at the percentage, I believe it was 19% of our students that we have
I think it
compared
was up to
enrollment.
24 at one
Oh,
point.
it used to be large. Part of that is due to the RTI intervention piece. I know Dr. Borff was kind of alerted a couple years ago when our numbers were reduced because the students were not being referred for special ed testing. It was due to the RTI intervention piece. And so when my numbers go down, my funding goes down a little bit. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, but yes,
Thanks.
we're seeing that.
Are we able to provide services for all of our special needs students that wish to attend Richmond schools?
I believe so. I think we do a very good
So
job.
we don't have to contract any services anywhere?
We do not at this time. We do have a contract that we have, but right now, those services are being provided here within our own school district. So I believe that the number of students that we have enrolled and have IEPs, I believe our teachers do a very nice job of making sure those IEPs are developed correctly and the services are being provided. Great. Okay. All right, I'm going to have Mrs. Lettington. She's our teacher of our deaf and hard of hearing, and I believe she has a simulation for you to represent about a hearing loss.
I
We're all a little nervous, I'll tell you.
Well, this is going back to my childhood using a familiar character. So what I want you to do is just put yourself in mind of a classroom setting, if you will. You're not going to be able to adjust the volume. I've already given strict orders for no volume controls to be adjusted. This is strictly a listening exercise. It's froze.
Could be in trouble here.
It's not a touchscreen.
I got it. Thank you.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Aha! You're on my apartment building on Granite Avenue. You owe me $300. Get it up?
Fred, take it easy. It's only a game.
Wilma, I'm just like them big tycoons. I play to win. Now, Barney, pay up or get out of the game. Put your book in. One down and two to go. Ready, it's your turn. I don't have any more money to do it. You got it all. Then I'll take the mortgage and your office call. Come on, take the money. Come on, just sit there like a dummy. I don't know what you're talking about right around here. Come on, Tommy. You better go help.
The last scenario is where the majority of our students with hearing impairments are. Imagine them being in a classroom trying to learn academics, and that's all they hear. That's why additional accommodations have to be in place, because with a damaged auditory system, they need some other parameters because they have different abilities. Keep that in mind. Mrs. Meyer's going to come forward. She's going to do another simulation, and we're not going to let you forget what you just heard. We're going to put them together at the end.
The same with deaf and hard of hearing. Oh, yes. Visual impairment also, it's a continuum. We all think, when we think of blindness, we think of the students, and you've met at least one of them who uses a cane, uses Braille in the classroom, and has all materials are modified. Those are 2 students that I work with out of 26. The other students are all have varying degrees of vision loss. And what I wanted to do today was, because we're all familiar with the concept of blindness, but this student with low vision looks very different. And you can walk through a school and you could walk right past a student with low vision and never know that they have low vision. In the classroom, they face unique challenges. So what I want you to do is open your pre-algebra book to page 245. And most of you have a saran wrap goggle in front of you. It looks like this. This is a spare, so if any of you who didn't get one, I made them for the school board members and I didn't make enough for everyone. So if anyone else would like to participate, I do have the goggles and the other materials that you would need. Anyone? Okay. It's taped on the back side. You can take the flaps and open it like this and then just put it on, and then the tape is back in the back.
Yeah, you really ought to take a picture of the.
Page 245 in your pre-algebra book.
No peeking.
No peeking.
Wow.
Wow.
Okay, now look around the room. You can see people sitting next to you. You can probably recognize them. You may be able to read large print on the wall. With the smaller print, you might be able to read Mission, but maybe not Richmond Community Schools. And your goggles are not identical. Every person, let's say they have a visual acuity of 20/80. 20/80 is not identical. One child with 20/80 functions differently than another. So on page 245 of your algebra book, in the middle of the page, there's a gray box. See if you can find the gray box in the middle of page 245. And it contains exercises 37 through 40. And there are directions there in red. I would like you to read the directions. And then copy number 37. I won't ask you to do number 37 because it is 8th grade pre-algebra. You know, it's been a while for some of us, most of us, since we've done that. Just see if you can copy. You should have a full sheet of paper next to you, a full sheet of notebook paper, and a number 2 pencil. And I'll give you 2 minutes to copy the problem.
Still looking for the gray box.
Number 37, correct?
Number 37.
Talking in class.
Some people haven't found the gray box yet.
Okay, very good point. It's hard to see the gray box, isn't it? It's easier to see the black print.
I did find 37.
Okay.
That's
Go help them.
excruciating.
It's more than difficult.
If you're finished, would you raise your hand? Thank you.
The gifted group.
Have a product or just
You can get as close to your work as you need. Has everyone had enough time? Let's just talk about it for just a moment. You don't have to finish. How many of you thought that was an easy exercise? Raise your hand if that was easy for you. Okay, what were some things that were difficult? Very quickly. Raise your hand if you have something that was difficult, a comment about this thing that I asked you to do. Yes, Glenn, or Jeff, sorry.
Just the focus, just focusing.
Okay. Did you find you had to turn your head, kind of move your head up and
Finding
down?
sort of holes
Many
in
of
the
my
vision.
students have to hold their head in a certain way to get their best vision. All day long.
And the
Reading,
small
math.
numbers were the worst.
The small numbers, okay, if you remember what exponents are, the little numbers, like 3 squared, the little 2 at the top, it was, maybe you could read the larger numbers, but the exponents were difficult for you. Maybe you couldn't even read the larger numbers. How many of you had difficulty reading the red letters? The gray box was hard to find. Okay, these are some issues that a dozen of my students face every single day in the classroom. What could we do to help them? Very quickly, any ideas? What modifications, what accommodations could we make for these students?
Larger
Larger
print.
text.
Large print. Many of my
Fine
students have
glass.
all of their books in large print. The book that you're holding right there, or that is on the table in front of you, is 8 volumes in large print. This is one of 8. So the
wow.
stack of books for that student for one class is this high. It's a large stack. What else could we do besides large print?
Audio,
I'm sorry, what?
audio.
Audio. Some of my students listen to most of my students prefer to read because they can go back and look again. But audio is an option, and we do that with some of the students.
Probably watching that color. I would say no, not doing the color
Okay?
change.
We ask the teachers to use black on their smart boards and avoid the red,
Yeah.
if that's difficult for that particular child. Color is very important. That's an issue of contrast. The better the contrast, the better that student can see, and the colors are difficult for some children. Any other ideas?
Magnifying glasses.
Magnifying glasses, we have those that are provided to students who will use them. I will tell you that many of my students, after about 3rd grade, they don't want these books. They don't want the magnifier, they don't want the slant board, because they want to be like all their friends. So it's something that we have to be very sensitive to. Additionally, we can use paper with bold lines. Was the blue lined paper difficult for you?
A little bit.
Okay, to stay on the line and have neater handwriting, we can use a darker pencil. There are art pencils that are a black or lead. So those are some of the accommodations that we would make for the students.
What happens when they go on like an iPad or a computer?
iPads are wonderful, and most of the programs, and when they go online, they can adjust the settings, and we can make the font larger. It's helpful for many of them. Some of my students have difficulty with the glare on the screen or the light coming from, it's harder for them to see. Some of my students choose to take tests with paper pencil. Others prefer the computer. It just depends on the child. That's a really good question. Any other comments? Okay, good job, guys. All right, Brenda.
And you were all quick to take off the bubble wrap. Why?
I knew it.
You need to put it back on.
I knew it.
Because there's one more group of students we work with, and they are students that have both disabilities. They are deaf and blind. In addition to the full sheet of paper you have on front of you, you have a half a sheet of paper. You're going to take a spelling test.
Half a sheet. Which one?
Oh, my goodness.
And the good news is there will only be 3 words. Okay? So making sure everybody is ready. Looks like you are. So here we go.
Write the words in column A. Ball,
That's number 1.
key. Heart.
Wow.
You got all those, right?
Yes.
Sure you did. Just in case, you see the paper is folded in half, you're gonna get another chance to try. Here's your second attempt.
Referred to a hearing aid. Write the words in column C. Ball.
Number 1.
C.
Number 2.
Hard.
And number 3.
Number 2 is hard word, I can.
How many think they got all 3 words? Number 1, what did you write down?
Ball.
Ball. B-A-L-L. Number 2.
Food?
Sheep?
I heard food.
B.
You're close. It was the word see.
C. Oh, wow.
And the third word?
Hard?
Hard.
Harv.
Hard. Okay.
Harv.
Ah.
I heard
Second
hard
time, I
twice.
think. Oh, my God.
So now you may take off your simulated goggles. And hopefully through these exercises, you'll have a little better understanding of some additional challenges that some of the students here at Richmond go through each and every day. Thank you.
Those are exceptionally good experiences. I mean, for as simple as that was fantastic.
Glad to hear
It was a
that.
very good illustration.
If you would like to keep it, you may.
I would actually love that. I think that.
And if you would prefer to send it back, just, if you, send your materials to the front, just like they do in the classroom, and we'll collect them.
Gotta have the books back,
How
right?
did we do with that?
Mrs. Harris would want her books back.
We'd like to thank Mrs. Meyer and Mrs. Ludington for coming for their simulation. Thank you.
so much. That was
Passing them on at times to get a real good workout.
These are heavy.
They are heavy. The Braille version of this book is 62 volumes, and we have a seventh grader using it this year.
Thank you very much for coming, and thank you for what you do every day for our kids.
I kept the pencil, though, didn't I?
Oh, so did I.
Okay. We are ready to go into our public hearing. And so the public hearing is now open. And the purpose of this hearing is to offer the public an opportunity for comments and questions regarding the 2015 to 2017 capital projects plan, the 2015 to 2026 school bus replacement plan, and the 2015 budgets. Karen Scalf, Director of Business Affairs, will present this information, and we invite questions at the conclusion of each portion of her presentation.
Okay, good evening. It is the time when we discuss what has been advertised. So basically this year, we have things that look a little bit different than in past years because now most everything is entered in Gateway prior to publishing. So we are directed from the state as to how this looks. It's small on your screen. It is also on the website, should anyone want to take a peek at it. But this is the notice to taxpayers regarding our budget. This is our overall budget for all funds. You will see all funds listed at the bottom. It will also let you know that our adoption date is September the 24th at noon here in the administration building. Are there any questions on this notice?
Anyone from the public?
Okay. And we will move on. This is the notice to taxpayers regarding our bus replacement plan. This is a 12-year plan, and this was advertised twice in the newspaper, just as the other 3 documents were. And are there any questions on this plan?
Doesn't look like it.
All right, and we will move to the last one. This is our capital projects fund plan. This is a 3-year plan, and it was also advertised. And it will also be up for adoption on September the 24th at noon as well. Any questions on the capital projects plan? All right, for details on the budget, you're more than welcome to go to the Gateway where you can see everything that we do and have presented to the DLGF upon adoption. If you have any questions, feel free to contact
Perhaps
me.
you could share that web address with the public so that they could find it easily?
I can, if it were me, the most simple way, because it has a very long address, would just to be to go to www.in.gov, and then in the search screen, type in Gateway, and there's a public portal that you'll click to. The public portal is a little different than my portal, and it's much simpler if you just go to the search engine to find it on that website.
Thank you. I hope that'll be helpful to people.
Thank you, Karen.
Thanks.
And now I need a motion to close the public hearing, please.
So moved.
Motion made by Aaron Stevens, seconded by Susie Hively. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. The public hearing is now closed. And now we are ready to move on to action items.
Our first item tonight is a revision to administrative benefits, and we will turn to our Human Resources Director, Mrs. Stewart, to present that recommendation.
Basically, this document is an edited version. We had some editing corrections to make. And there is a section that refers to the manner in which vacation days will be handled at the end of the contract. That's the only change. It's recommended that the board approve the document as corrected.
Okay, a motion made by Jeff Slifer, seconded by Kelly Baumgardner. Comments or questions? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried.
Our next item is a request to approve change order on the RHS track. Mr. Tidrow, would you like to present that?
Yes, as many of you know, we've completed the track resurfacing out there by Live Oak Field. It looks outstanding. And this is a change order to finish up that project. We had a contract price of $184,709. We have an add to that of $1,720. And then we also have a deduct request of $5,434 to bring a final contract price of $180,995. So the recommendation is that the Board of School Trustees approves that change order number 1 for the Richmond High School new running track.
Okay, motion made by Jeff Slifer, seconded by Aaron Stevens. Comments or questions?
The deduct come because of the deletion of the fence on the perimeter facing the south side of the track.
Correct.
So we're just not putting the fence back up?
At this point, we are not. We had a request from the athletic director to do some other surfacing there, maybe some foliage and so forth.
Okay.
But with the new athletic director, we're giving him the option of giving us some information. But we like it as it is without anything back there, so it's good.
Good enough.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried.
Thank you.
The next action item is a determination as to what we want to see happen to the property that was Garrison Elementary School. For the last couple of years, we have done nothing because it's been on an inventory list with the state for unused buildings, unused for instructional purposes. The requirement has been that those buildings be on there for a length of time to give charter schools an opportunity to consider them for possible use. That building came off the inventory list as of the beginning of this month. So it's up to the board now to determine what you would like to see happen to that building. Now, it can be disposed of, it can be renovated, it can be demolished, it can be a number of things, but the board has to put us, administrators, on some course of action. And what I would like to do is open up for consideration tonight, or for discussion tonight, that very topic. I need to have some direction from the board. If we do anything in the way of leasing or selling that property, it will take some appraisals. And perhaps that's the next step you want to determine what direction you want, but we need to hear from you on this.
Okay. Could we have some, okay, we know what it's costing us now to run that building as it is. And-
Operationally, it's in excess of $60,000 a year.
Okay. What would the cost be if we chose to demolish the building?
Mr. Mays, would you like to speak to that?
To demolish the building, we would be looking at about $100,000 or $90,000 to demolish the building. But there are other costs associated with that. Is that if we wanted to take out the parking lots and do that work, when what you take out the parking lot, you got to put dirt back in, we'd be looking at another $25,000. When we look at demolition, the state requires us to do an asbestos survey, so that would cost about $8,000 to do the building. So, and then we would have to send the plans by an engineer, which would cost another $8,000. So the bottom line would be $131,000. Now, if you elected not to do the parking lot demolition, you could take $25,000 off of that.
The cost, the operational cost that you provided, does that include the testing of the water on a frequent basis?
Well, the water system right now, since we're not using it, and the testing is based upon the number of occupants in the building.
Okay.
Since we have 0 occupants, we really haven't been testing the water.
We have been testing the water out there a little bit as needed.
But not like we have to,
Well,
had to.
no, but it has been done, and that is a part of the cost. I went with 13 costs, because part of the year it was, the water was on and we were using it. So that was how much it was, yes.
The, just to give you an idea, right now, if we would decide to close the building down and mothball it, then we would be looking at a boiler repair of about $10,000 this winter to get the boiler working and working properly. Then if we then go through the spring, summer, and fall, the chiller that we have there is, we have to go down there every day. Glenn has people down there every day to make sure it's operating. And that would be, to replace the chiller would be $60,000. Okay, now why does he have to go down there and see that it's operating? Because if we don't, the high humidity that we have, then we have mold spores and the air quality is not acceptable. So we would have to do that. So then, if we shut it down, then we would just have to do minor heat and do a little bit of air conditioning and then lock the doors, because right now we have had people use the building. We've had baseball players, football players, things like that. So we've had to maintain some restrooms, and we've had to maintain some heat. So and electricity. So we still, even though we said we're not using it, we are using it. So we need to, if we're going to, just bite the bullet and lock the doors.
I guess here's one of the things that we need to get the conversation going is we know that we have perhaps an interested party to lease the building. Is that correct, Dr. Borf?
We have been informed, yes.
But not the entire building. So we need to ask ourselves, a question that we need to ask ourselves is, do we want to be in the leasing business? And what will that entail for us and for our administration? So,
Especially a partial building.
yeah. Jeff, you were, I cut you off a couple
Well,
of
no,
times,
I-
I'm sorry.
I was just curious, on your demolish, did that include any kind of salvage value or anything like
No,
that?
no,
So,
no. There's really,
it wouldn't be
it's
a
more
nice-
expensive to salvage than it is to just haul away unfortunately, to the dump.
I don't know if it would pay
Probably
us
not listed.
to lease part of the building.
One thing you have to look at, if you don't lease the entire building and you lease just a portion of it, there is some cost to that because you then now have to maintain that part that you're not leasing because you can't shut it off. And to do that, then again, you'd have to put a new boiler and we would have to do the replacement for the condensing unit. But Ron Robinson, 3 or 4 years ago, he put together a program where we had to replace the boiler and the chiller of about $300,000. And we feel on the boiler, in talking with Glenn today, that's a 1990 boiler, it's oil, and it's only 60% efficient. So not only is it not efficient, we're using oil. So we would have to look at that. Then we would have to recondition the unit ventilators like we did at C.R. Richardson of about $10,000. We would need $5,000 in there for temperature control. And then unfortunately, this winter, we had the domestic hot water pipe burst and flooded part of the building with water. And so when we cut into those pipes, because it was a way of taking away the pipes that were leaking, we just cut them off and patched them. They're halfway full of rust and sludge from the water, because the water system is not that good water because there's a lot of iron in the water. So we would have to go in and take care of that to the tune of about $15,000. So just to give you a bottom line number, that if we maintain half of the building for the school corporation, we could have an investment of $100,000 just to bring it up to acceptable leasing quality.
Okay, so one of our options would be to lease, possibly. Another option, obviously, is to sell it, but we have the cabin that we need to think about that is there. So we have to think about that, or possible demolishing. So are those pretty much the three options that we need to be considering?
I think those are the three options.
Susie?
Do we know how much it would cost to relocate the cabin?
Around 80 to 85,000.
That just seems so.
Do we need, have we had an appraisal at all on it?
Of the building?
Yes.
No.
And I don't know how they would do an appraisal to find a comparable. I mean, I think that is going to be difficult to come to a value of the building. And it sounds in the long run like it would be prudent to have the building demolished if you're looking at facts and figures, you know, and
Maybe leave the parking lot. I mean, I'm
and the
not sure what
cabin.
At least you could use it as outdoor space.
If they were considering leasing the whole building, I guess there are just so many, we don't know
I don't
how
know
the
that
lease would be
we
written,
could,
we don't know. And I remember Bob Coddington, we are not in leasing, I remember that, his exact words, we are not in the leasing business.
I mean, with the figures that Mr. Mays just gave us, I can't imagine anyone being able to afford to lease the building. with what we would have to charge in order to take care of the repairs that need to be.
Well, that was one of the reasons why we
That was
closed the
one of the
school to begin
closures.
with.
Well, and I think we have a responsibility. I mean, if you drive into Boston and you see that old school sitting there, just gone to weeds and trash, and so if we decide to put it on the market, I think that the demolish option, we don't have to get an appraisal, just the lease and the resale, correct?
I'd have to defer to our
I didn't
attorney
hear
for that.
Said to demolish it, we wouldn't have to have an appraisal versus leasing itself.
So I guess the thing that concerns me about the lease would be my least favorite, I can tell you that right off the top. If we decided we wanted to get an appraisal and try to sell it, I mean, we would have to get an appraisal to sell it. I don't know what that would cost, but I think we'll have several $1,000s invested in that probably. I can't believe that the appraisal would come in at a market value high enough that
Be worth demolishing.
that it would be worth trying to save it. I mean, I honestly, and then if it does come in, let's say that it's appraised at 30,000 or something, some low number. I don't expect it to be appraised very high, but let's just say it come in at a low number. And we put it out for bids, and unless I'm wrong, if we get a bid option that's within 10% of the appraised value, do we hold control on whether we could sell it or not?
You can reserve the right to reject all proposals, but you can accept one that's 90% of your average of the two appraisals without having to have it reappraised.
Because if
The problem becomes if you get an offer that's less than 90% of the average of the two
Right.
appraisals, then you have to have it reappraised. And if you had multiple offers, which is probably not likely, you'd have to give the other lower offeror a chance to raise their bid. But
How many acres is that lot? I forget.
Couldn't tell you.
Would you think that would the land be more valuable
That's why I asked how many acres.
there and then put up for someone to develop it or do something with it
Or turn it back into farmland.
or turn it back into farmland?
Still got the cabin.
Well, and I'm wondering if there isn't someone who would be interested in the cabin who, I mean, for example, it might be a nice addition to the County Historical Museum. It might, I mean, if again,
We had a committee that,
We have had a committee to
Okay.
review those options, and
Several years ago.
Cope
We
was
still have it.
an idea, but they don't have the funds to move it and to care for it, really. And the museums aren't interested.
If I recall, I think we had a price figure someplace around $40,000 to disassemble it and then move it to Cope.
Yeah, you were on that committee, weren't you?
To move it to Cope. That would have been 40,000.
I thought it was more than that.
I think that was a low figure, yes.
Yeah, because it has to be taken apart log by log and then reassembled. So, well, Dr. Borf, do you have a recommendation that you feel would be in our best interest?
I'm not sure what the appraisal costs would be. If the board would be inclined to have us pursue that, it might not be a bad idea just to see what that would cost us to
The
have
cost of an
appraised.
appraisal would be.
It won't cost us anything to find out what the cost is.
Right, right. And how long how long that might take, because we can't answer that tonight. But we could find that out and see if that is anything that you're interested in. If you are, then we could go ahead and commission that to be done and just to see what it's worth.
when they do appraisals like that, would we be able to say what's its value as is, kind of, and what would its value be if the school was demolished and just as a property?
I can't imagine them being able to appraise.
Would they appraise the site?
They wouldn't unless you ask. I mean, but, you know.
Would that be a typical question, though, to appraise the site and then the site plus the building?
I don't know if it's typical. I recall that was a comment made on one of the appraisals of the Hibbert building. The property would have been worth more without the building than it was.
What would be the advantage of finding out what the value is?
The advantage would be that if, let's say that it were to be appraised for something greater than the value of the cabin, we could sell that and relocate the cabin with the money made through the sale of the property. Because I don't know that anyone's interested in leaving the cabin for someone else to own.
No.
It would be so nice to be able to keep the cabin in some way.
The only issue I have a little bit about that is that it has been open to use since we left Garrison. Has it been used at all?
Not to my knowledge.
No.
But
I
it's
mean-
because of, it's out there.
It's because it's not in the right location, and I
We would like to see it
understand that
relocated
to
to
a
one of our
point, but
buildings.
we also go on lots of field trips, and I don't know that we've taken one field trip out there, so.
We have not.
So I just get, for example, if we were to demolish it, keep the property and use it as an outdoor space, which I think would be fantastic and fun, I'm just not sure that it's going to get used because,
Well, one of the things that we
No
talked
facilities.
about on the committee was that very thing. And one of the things that we said that we felt would happen, that unless someone takes charge.
right,
And does the organizing and so forth.
and creates cabin days to have there to bring people to, I think then
Right,
it would get
and
used. probably.
People have just been really busy,
Sure.
and that has not been
Sure. That
a
makes sense.
priority right now. And
I
so,
understand.
but I think that if we did have someone who would like to do that organizational piece, that perhaps we would have interest in. I mean, it could be pretty neat.
Yeah, it's also gonna be very difficult though to, when they're, like right now, you said someone's going out there every day.
Well, one
That
of the
traffic creates some security.
things we did do, though, we opened up 2 restrooms. I think we cleaned up 2 classrooms so that they could use the cabin. It's on the northwest corner of the building. So as an outcome of part of that cabin committee was to set it up so that any teacher that wanted to use it we had restrooms and we had 2 classrooms set up.
And no one's
No, nobody used it.
taking advantage.
Makes sense to get at least a cost of the appraisal, to see what it would cost and see if that makes it cost effective. I mean, is it worth our time and dollar to get an appraisal done? That makes sense to me.
Well, you know, the main reason why we closed the building was the fact that it was gonna cost over $4.5 million
To fix it.
to fix it.
Exactly.
I mean, we can't, I mean, that was the primary reason why I
Absolutely.
voted for it.
Well, and I think Dr. Borf made the comment also that to drive by or to drive into the parking lot, people might think, oh my, why in the world would this building be closed? It's such a nice building. But it has major issues that on the inside that need to be tended to. And so.
And it's interesting, after hearing Mr. Mays talk about a building being closed down and water systems being turned off, and you go to open that, you're gonna find a lot of other problems that you do.
Yeah, that's the conservative
I bet,
estimate.
you know, I think they're giving us very conservative numbers.
'Cause you'll always find more.
I think it'd be much higher than that, personally.
Once you crank that on,
I think
all the
that's true
piping.
too.
Because I'm sure all the ceiling tile in there are ruined, I'm sure everything needs painted, I'm sure, I
Mhm.
mean,
I don't think we have much to lose if we go ahead with the opportunity to get the appraisal.
I think we should find out how much it's gonna cost.
That would
do
be my
too.
thought too.
And then
I'm
can you-
guessing it's gonna be expensive.
I'm guessing 30,000.
I
You're
would
gonna be looking
really,
at approximately 1,500 to 1,700 for each appraisal. You have to have 2.
That's not very much.
oh, I would
Unless
thought
you
it would
just
be a
want
lot
to test
more
the
than
waters
that.
with one, and, as to see the range of values. And it's not impossible to get comps. Remember, we just did this for Dennis for the for the bond project. Again, the number came in remarkably low, but,
And that has a use, you know, I mean,
Well, I'm hearing some interesting directions in this conversation. I don't know if we would be, I suppose one of the questions we could ask the appraisers would be to find out what the site value would be as opposed to the site plus the building value.
Correct.
We could,
I'm definitely not interested in leasing personally, though.
Especially not partial. I just think that's.
Well, and then the selling, we would have to sell it for enough to be able to move the cabin, right?
that would be in
The
the
hope.
best of all possible worlds, yes, that's what we would hope for.
And we don't, the thing is, not just move the cabin, but create a place for it somewhere else. Because there needs to be a foundation for it, and
That's right.
there's some other work that would have to be done at the new location as well.
so if we talked about demolishing Garrison, then would we just leave the cabin out there?
That's the question I have, because then security's gonna be a problem,
Right.
and there's not gonna be someone out there every day, and.
I think it's highly unlikely that we would use that facility, that cabin, just out there by itself.
With no
You wouldn't take a
restrooms and-
classroom out there, that's right, without restrooms and
fit.
other shelter.
We would maintain the, mow it, but that's only in the summer and stuff, but, we wouldn't have a constant person out there every day, so.
We looked at the possibility of tearing the building down except for two classrooms and
that.
restrooms right there in that one corner. And it's not feasible to do that either, because the part we have to tear down is where all of our boilers and everything else is, so we'd have to put a different type of heating plant and everything in that one corner. So we did look at that.
Well, so I think I'm hearing people say that, that you would like to, for Dr. Borf to pursue the appraisal cost.
That's
And-
what I've heard.
And then you can bring that back to us probably at the next meeting.
Mhm.
So would you like for us to have a motion to that effect?
Sure,
Or,
that would be helpful.
okay,
So moved.
all right, motion made by Susie,
Second.
seconded by Kelly Baumgartner. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Okay, we are now ready for our work session.
Now, this is the work session on policy 2265, and I would like to begin by reviewing with the board that policy, because that policy is broader than the topic we've been discussing. This policy is actually about the enrollment, not the extracurricular participation, though that's a component of it. It's really about the enrollment of private school students. And what we need to be doing as we're reviewing policy is to make sure the policy says what we want it to say. Does it reflect our current position with regard to enrollment of private school students? So as we look at this first paragraph, I don't think there's any doubt that we do encourage full-time enrollment of school-aged children with residence in the corporation. But we may want to add these days that we encourage full-time enrollment of children in this area, whether they are residents here or not, because that's where we are in regards to open enrollment across districts. And as we're looking at this policy, it says students may transfer from a non-accredited private school, including homeschool, in accordance to Board Policy 5463. We also need to make sure that that policy corresponds, and I believe it does. We've reviewed that, and I believe it does, but we would want to examine that. We wouldn't want to do anything to this policy without examining that policy. Now, the academic enrollment is a question. Of course, we're concerned about that, and this is the bottom line of the policy. Again, who is a legal resident of the corporation? We may want to expand on that thought just a bit. And such enrollments will be submitted to the Department of Education for fiscal purposes only. Well, I'm not so sure that we would look at just the fiscal purposes only these days. The other piece on the very bottom sentence does say any fees, but we might want to be specific about tuition support. If they don't come in before the ADM count, then it would be an issue that we would have to handle tuition support as well, and that can be very expensive. We should be transparent in our statements there. Now we get to the co-curricular and extracurricular participation, and that has driven much of our conversation. I would suggest that as we're looking at this policy, we be very specific and talk about our intermediate program. With the discussion of the IHSAA and the term course, I can see how, without a precedent here, someone might look at that and question whether it even pertains to the intermediate program. There is no mention of intermediate there, but that's because this policy was written before we had intermediate terms defining our buildings. What gave us precedent, though, was that we denied a request by a student and his parents to participate earlier. We interpreted it at that time that this policy defined the action that we needed to take. That defines where we are, or that gave precedent to the position that you've taken since then. But my suggestion is that if we look at expanding this policy or enhancing this policy, we might want to specifically say that elementary and intermediate would be a part of this. And you know, in elementary school, we don't even talk in terms of courses. So we might want to talk about subjects or percentage of the day, some such thing. This is where we might want to go. Now, we also looked at our guidelines. The guidelines do follow fairly specifically with the policy. I wouldn't make any changes to the guidelines before we revise the policy, but we would probably have to revise guidelines thereafter. Part E follows fairly closely to the policy piece, providing extracurricular participation. And then, of course, as I said earlier, any discussion of a policy change has to be in the context of its interaction with other policies. So we would, though we would be focusing on one policy, we would probably be examining any other policy that is somewhat related. And those might end up being part of the revision process. So that's a quick review of where we stand. Typically, when we review policy or when we revise policy, there's a timeline involved. My suggestion for tonight, if you agree that this policy should be reviewed, we have a policy committee for just that purpose. And between now and October 7th, we would be looking at convening that committee to review just this policy. The reason that we would not be trying to do that within the 2-week period is because the next item would be a public work session where you invite the public in to comment and work with the board. I mean, that has been your practice. You wouldn't have to do that, but that would be my suggestion, that you would have a public work session where the public would be able to come in, public meaning coaches, students, as well as parents who are concerned. And they would be able to interact with the board in much the same way that we have developed our other work sessions within the last year or two to do just that. Following that meeting, where you take that information and you look at the draft policy and try to apply what has been gained at the work session into editing that policy, then you would go to a first reading of a draft, which would be at the October 29th meeting, and then November 12th would be the second reading and adoption. I didn't go back and say why we wouldn't want to have the work session at the next board meeting. The next board meeting is going to be at noon, and it will be a shorter meeting, but it also wouldn't allow some of the discussion opportunities for parents who work. So we would not be having a work session. That's the day of homecoming, so everything has been rearranged that day. But the second reading and adoption, if it worked according to plan, would be on November 12th. Now, that's assuming that there would be no other work sessions on other policies that would be directly related to this, that we would have to create special board meetings for, or additional time schedules. But this would be my recommendation, that we send this to policy revision through the policy committee.
And I think October 8th would be the work session. I don't know that you mentioned the date.
October 8th, that's right.
And that's our regular work session time anyway.
Sure.
So that would work in. Good. Comments?
I
Susie?
think it's a good approach.
This all makes sense, and it does look like the policy needs to be updated because it doesn't reflect our current organization, and it also perhaps doesn't reflect kind of future thinking, I guess, is the way I would describe it. The thing that's been bothering me, though, since we last talked about this issue, is that we have a couple of kids who, through no particular fault of their own, got caught in a catch-22. Basically, they got caught between a rock and a hard place because of the way that the requests to participate was handled. And I think it's really, I think while their situations are outside of the direction that we're going in for this policy, I think it's really unfortunate that they didn't receive more direct feedback when they were making the initial requests to participate. And I guess I would consider some type of a waiver in this one situation, just out of consideration for the situation that they've been placed in by the personnel that represented us and was working with them. And I think that might be appropriate to have a sort of a one-time situation waiver and let us go forward with our policy and then implement that policy once it's been redefined. So that's my thought on it.
Hasn't that decision already been made?
It was discussed.
I've received.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah, when it does go to the policy committee, will we be reviewing those other policies that you talked about that go along with it?
They'd have to be brought into it.
And then come back with suggestions?
Mhm.
And, okay.
Any other?
How long ago was the incident where we denied a student, was it intermediate participation?
It was, and I think it was 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
3.
Skeleton.
Do you want us to do any kind of a vote or anything for these dates, or
I think.
is it just?
The only thing that I would encourage the board to do would be to send this to the policy committee for revision, because the timeline, you can't really hold yourselves to, depending on future conversations.
Okay. So, do we need to vote on it going to the policy committee, or is that
With the
just-
idea that it would be brought back to the October 8th work session for a recommendation, or as in draft form.
Okay.
I would so move.
Okay, so we have a motion that the policy will be sent to our policy committee, and then the recommendation will be brought to, or their recommendation will be brought to the October 8th public work session. And do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Aaron Stevens. Comments or questions?
Linda,
Ron?
just for benefit of the public perhaps, the policy committee, is that a committee created by the superintendent or created by the board president?
It is created.
That has been, the policy committee has been my committee.
It's been your committee?
Mhm.
Okay, so it's not necessarily subject to the open door law or public, or the ability of the public to observe.
And
But I would
That we
have, I
build
don't think
public
we would
hearing
have any
into it.
problem.
Right.
We will advertise that.
Okay, that was the point I wanted to make, because I wasn't sure which way you were headed, but.
could you please review for us who's on that policy committee?
We have one or two representatives from the REA. We have generally, and it's not necessarily the same cabinet members every time, it depends on who or what the policy is about. We would generally have one or two cabinet members. In this case, there would probably be a principal involved, and then I would welcome, well, we normally have two board members, and then I would welcome a parent to be on this one.
Okay. Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried.
Which board members?
Well, I know
Kelly. And Kelly. And it has, the two of you, it's been Jeff and Kelly.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but at the beginning of the year, we set who the members are on the board, I believe, on that particular committee, on our policy committee.
I think you
Because
did.
we are constantly reviewing policy.
Usually we do it by section. It hasn't come to where we usually just review one. So this will be interesting.
And this is how it should be after we finish the next section. We're close to that one.
Guess we're about 2/3 of the way through 7,000, so.
Okay,
Could
sounds like a plan.
I know that when we had talked the last time that a waiver was a possibility for these kids, but I don't recall us making any kind of decision about it, or as a group, or else I mean, could you remind me of if we did that?
It wasn't discussed in the last discussion. I think I brought it to you that was a consideration. How do you reconcile that kind of recommendation against the student who was turned down?
I think this is a different situation. I don't know the particulars of the prior situation, but from my understanding of these situations is that these kids were led to believe that this was something that would be possible. They weren't told, oh no, we have this policy and that won't work. And that's the part of it that makes me uncomfortable, is that we weren't, the board, the school system wasn't represented very well by the people who were in the position to have those discussions with these families. And if they were misled, I think that's really unfortunate, and if it's because of the way we were represented, then I would like to take that into consideration.
Well, I think, I think it's very unfortunate. I agree with that. But it's also board policy. I would hate to set something up that because someone wasn't informed, that we have all these other policies that we'll just have to put to wayside because it wasn't followed correctly. We put that board policy out, and I think if we go against the board policy, as we have ruled in the past, I just think that we're opening ourselves up to processes that's going to cause us more problems down the road. I mean, unfortunately, in this case, there should have been several questions asked, and they weren't asked. Whether I agree or disagree with this policy, I really don't think that we're in a position to have an opinion on it. It is board policy. I mean, it's like if you get arrested for speeding and you have some emergency, you feel like you have to get home, does that allow you to still speed? We can't change the policy because somebody in the system didn't do something the correct way. That's where I stand on it. If the policy needs to be changed, then by all means, let's change it. But let's go through the process and change it correctly. Because if we allow this, in my opinion, I think we're doing an injustice to the other student that we turned down. I think, what if we have 20 other students that say, hey, wait a minute, I want to play too. I'm not enrolled. So I don't know if creating a problem here and doing a short-term fix will create a lot of other problems on the other side. So personally, I think we have to apologize, but I'm not in favor of a grant and waiver myself. So.
And Dr. Borb, you sent letters to those parents, correct?
Yes.
Any other comments?
I do have a question. How many, we heard from a student who was currently engaged. We heard of one who had the promise of engagement. Do we know whether that's it?
What do you mean, if there are other students who might be in that same?
These are the ones that have come to the forefront. I'm concerned about because maybe the coaches didn't have full understanding of the policy, or for whatever reason we weren't represented accurately.
I don't believe we have any.
Okay.
No one else has been
And then we
reported.
heard of one football player, and then we heard of one diver.
Correct.
But you had a
The
conversation.
diver hadn't actually started.
We have had conversations with the outgoing and the incoming athletic directors.
Okay.
And so they're having conversations with the coaches. Nothing else has.
But haven't you had conversations with other parents who were anticipating
Yes.
being able to?
So there's, and I know there were others because we heard of other, we heard from parents, future parents.
That's right.
But I'm just wondering how many folks are we talking about? Clearly, we have to look at the policy. We have to decide and be clear and have it represent our current situation.
So are you asking how many
I'm
parents
just wondering
might
how
be
many
out there waiting for us to
expecting
say,
that-
yes, your children can participate?
No, or that have already been told, yeah, we're looking forward to having you next year. I mean, is there a bunch of those?
I couldn't answer
Okay,
that.
I was just
No, I
curious
don't.
if
But
you've
there were
come
more
across
for
that.
this year, correct?
More than just two, is what I'm saying.
Exactly.
More than two. Uh-huh.
That were in some way perhaps there was a misrepresentation
Okay.
in what they were being told
Okay.
that did not reflect our current board policy.
And it also brought up the question, I'm sorry, I just interrupted you. It brought up the question of, when we do hire coaches, lay coaches, if, I mean, I know all of our policies are open to the public and, online, but if the coaches know about the policies or are familiar with the policies that go with their sport or go with athletics, if that's something we need to make a point in the future to make sure we're doing. I don't know what process they go through when they're brought in, or if
Well,
there is a process.
I can't address that either, but I do know that Mr. Carr was in conference with me and the intermediate football coaches, and we all discussed the process and the policies and where the policies are, and if there are any questions about how policy is implemented or designed, it's incumbent on the coaches to ask the athletic director for some direction there. I don't think the coaches felt that they were acting improperly either. So it is unfortunate. But we also granted or suggested a way that the students who are currently in those situations could make themselves eligible for participation.
Following the current policy.
Following the
Okay.
policy, that's right.
Aaron?
The policy as it stands now under the academic enrollment as well as the co-curricular and extracurricular participation also gives the opportunity to meet certain criteria that would allow participation.
That's what we're talking about, yeah,
Right.
enrollment.
The academic enrollment, according to the existing policy, the student may enroll in one or more academic courses with the approval of the superintendent.
3.
That's
I think you're reading a
That's-
different part of that, though, than the extracurricular.
You're reading the guidelines.
okay.
But if they
The
come,
co-curricular and the academic enrollment, a student who is enrolled in a but who is a legal resident of the corporation may enroll in one or more academic courses with the approval of the superintendent. That's academic enrollment. Co-curricular and extracurricular participation, a student who is enrolled,
I see what you're saying.
Such accredited or non-accredited, but taking 3 or more courses at a corporation school may participate in one or more. There's a difference between the academic, it's 1 or more academic courses. With the extracurricular or the co-curricular, it's 3 or more courses. Do we still have the opportunity for the families involved currently, whether it be with the 2 that have been identified or any of those that may be out there in the wings, still to allow this adherence to the policy to continue with the participation? Because I have a heartfelt understanding for the students that we're discussing right now. I really do. Think we have the existing policy, and as a board, we're the one, that's one of our major things, one of our major responsibilities is to implement policy and be the setters of those policies. But we still have, everyone included has the opportunity still, I believe, unless it's too late, to enroll or to meet the criteria, whether it be under the academic enrollment or the co-curricular. Is that still a possibility?
Sure, that's what was offered in the letters.
All right.
I also just want to remind us that we had a situation not too awfully long ago where the board stood behind policy, and that was with the dress code. And we went through the appropriate process in order to make changes that needed to be made after ample input from many people, and we followed. We didn't just change the policy because there were some flaws in it until we went through the process. And
That's our responsibility.
and so that is our responsibility, to ensure that we go through the appropriate process and that we stand by the policies that this board sets. So, I think we're all deeply saddened that this happened, and it's been a learning experience for everyone involved. And, we are going to review our policy, and we're going to stand behind our policy the way it stands right now. We have given options. We certainly invite and welcome students to enroll in Richmond Community Schools and be a part of our co-curricular activities. So, you know, I just wanted to bring up the fact that this board has stood behind policy in the past, and not always easy to do, because we are so kid-centered. That's what we are about. And I'm thankful that that is what we're about. And, but we also have to stand behind our policy. So, with that said, are there any other comments before we move on? We are ready for our second public commentary.
We have Brett Guiley.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I again wanted to thank you for looking at policy 2265. I was here at one of the previous meetings and mentioned that I've been coaching youth football in this community for a number of years, primarily with private school children. I currently coach a team in the Hub Etchison Youth Football League composed of 14 students from Seton Elementary, one student from Community Christian, and one student that is homeschooled. I will remind you that after 6th grade, there is not an option to play intermediate football unless you attend or abide by the policy in Richmond Community Schools. Hub Etchison has typically been considered the gateway program or the youth building program for the high school program. So I'm here with the full support of the Richmond middle school, intermediate school, and high school coaches. They asked me to attend and share some of this information that I've gathered for you this evening. I'm not looking for an exception for a child that goes to another high school to play for Richmond High School. But what I am looking for is for the opportunity for these young men and potentially women that want to play football to have that opportunity. Football is unique in nature to other activities, and I'm not saying that the other activities aren't warranted for this policy as well, but football by nature takes a large number of individuals to compose a team. And it also tends to need unique facilities and equipment. And that's why I think it warrants your consideration when you're reviewing this policy in your work sessions. I have gathered some statistics you may want to write down as you're considering this policy. So currently, in your 7th grade intermediate football program, you have 35 players, approximately. In the 8th grade, you have 40 players. Now, the middle school coaches told me that they have a goal of sending 40 players per year to the high school level to Coach Oliva's program. So keep those numbers in mind when I tell you that in the Hub Etchison Youth Football League, which is 3rd through 6th grade, there are currently 93 kids enrolled in that program. Of those, 30 do not attend Richmond Community Schools. So 32% of the players in the youth football program, the tackle youth football program, don't attend Richmond Community Schools. I'm on the board for the YMCA. I'm also in charge of the programming committee. And so I have the opportunity to see the numbers of the flag football program, which reaches down into kindergarten. And that goes kindergarten through 3rd grade. And currently, there are 46 kids enrolled in the flag football program. Of those, 19 are non-Richmond Community Schools kids. So in this community right now, by head count, we have 139 kids enrolled in youth football. 49 of those kids, or 35% of the community football players, are not attending this school system right now. So if the goal is really to send 40 players up to the high school level a year, we've got a problem, because those numbers don't work long term, and I don't know where those kids are going to come from. Finally, my last point tonight, I wanted to take you back a few years to the late 90s. There was a young man that I recently contacted, and asked him about his football experience. And he was a Seton student all the way through middle school and then came to Richmond Community Schools. So he played at the Dennis Middle School in 7th and 8th grade and was a Seton student at the time. And he went on to graduate from Richmond High School and actually was named to the All-State football team his senior year, and also became an All-State wrestler. You might know him. His name is Ben Whistle. Thank you. Any questions?
Thanks,
Thank
Matt.
you.
Rick Fletcher.
Good evening. My name is Rick Fletcher, and I'm here to talk about this policy 2265, and I will be brief. You've all read my emails, and I promise you there's no more emails coming, okay? I've laid out my point. First, I want to thank you all. Dr. Boroff has been cooperative. We tried to come to some kind of conclusion, but we could not, which is okay, all right? We're moving on, that's fine. I'm not here for my son Nathan, I'm actually here for kids who might follow. There is a history of cooperation between the private schools and the public schools that actually goes on today. Mrs. Birdall, did I say that correctly? Okay. I remember my son who went through Community Christian, he had an IEP, a meeting with the teachers and the directors or whoever was there several occasions. I have another son, Nathan, who's in the 8th grade, and when he was younger, he had a speech problem. So your department provided a person. And I can't remember her name. I love that lady to death. If I see her right now, I'd hug her right now. But so there has been that kind of cooperation. Also, according to Kim Suits, who's the director of Community Christian, which is where our kids have gone to school, we used to send. She's been there for probably 25 years or more. I'm not exactly sure how long, but we used to send quite a few kids over into the middle school for band. That doesn't happen anymore. There's a gentleman right now, a young man who's a junior at Richmond High School, who plays on the football team. His name is Connor Lett. I think Connor got kind of caught up in the middle of this thing when the policy changed, because in the 7th grade he played for Dennis Middle School. The 8th grade he went to Seton. From CCS he went to Seton, and then he was told that's when the board decided to change the policy. He was told that the rules had changed and he could not play anymore. I think there's benefits for both sides. Obviously, the benefits for our kids at CCS or any private school kids are obvious. They get to participate. But I also want you to consider the benefits to your school corporation. There is open enrollment. There are vouchers. There's things that are more competition for all of us nowadays that you never had to deal with back in the day, so to speak. But there is some competition, and this would allow, I can only share my experience, this would allow kids who would otherwise not be a part of any program in the school system to be a part, and that would open their eyes to possibly going to Richmond High School. I can tell you honestly right now that when my son, who's in the 8th grade now, we're looking for a high school for next year, that Richmond High School is definitely on the radar screen for us. It was not before. Okay, it was not back in the beginning of this, in the spring we were discussing how he could play, but it is now. And the only reason that has happened is because he played for a month and a half with these kids and these people that are part of your school system. So it can happen. I would ask you to take, and there's going to be work sessions and things like that, I would ask you to take those things into consideration. But other than that, all we're asking, or all I would ask, again, I don't have a dog in the fight right now. When I believe it's Mrs. Hively, when you mentioned waiver, you sent my heart a flutter there. I thought maybe we were onto something, but I can understand Mr. Slifer. You can't do that. You have a policy, you have to stick with it. I totally get that. But there are kids behind us. I think, the statistics that Brett just cited, that's athletics. It's not just athletics. Richmond's got a fantastic band program also. That could be a draw. There's choir, there's theater, There's academics, and like I say, we are now researching the academics at Richmond High School, whereas before, that was not even on our radar screen. This was our gateway, and this is a true story, and I'm not just saying this. This is, I've told this story to everybody. So anyways, as you consider this change, I would like to just consider those things also. And I'd be more than happy to answer any question that you might have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Brad Van Vliet.
Hello, and thank you. Just kind of want to real quickly reiterate what Brett and Rick had mentioned. I come to you today as a Richmond High School grad, a former athlete, a parent, a coach of youth athletics. I, like Brett, have coached at the YMCA level, have coached currently at the Hub Etchison Youth Tackle Football level, have coached here at Richmond with the Richmond Wrestling Club, and also coached through what was the other one? Oh, through Seton, which is the current school to which my two kids are enrolled. So again, I have a second and a fourth grader, a long way away from dealing with this, but I just wanted to come and support as well the importance of the kids being able to play together at the middle school. And again, I reiterate, it's at the middle school. We understand the high school is a different topic, but at the middle school level, the importance of that. A couple of key things that are reasons that I feel this is important is I truly believe in the importance of athletics and in the ability of kids and what it does for them and their confidence and their ability to learn. And numbers are down in sports. We're seeing that across the country. We're seeing it in football. We're seeing it in many sports. It's hard for me to believe that at the hub level we have 3 teams in Richmond, and one of those teams is considered a Seton team at 3rd and 4th and 5th and 6th. When I first came into this community, I was on the hub board, and there was probably 6 to 8 teams at the 3rd and 4th grade and 5th and 6th grade level apiece. And now it's hard for us to get 3. So the numbers are down. We need the numbers. I don't want us to be turning kids away. And those are the ones that are going to step up and play at the next level. Also, as we had mentioned, this is a stepping stone for them to participate in the public schools. A parent like myself and my wife, we've made the decision, our kids, when they're old enough, will make the decision of where they want to go to school. We try to give them the best opportunities and that we can, but when they're old enough to make decisions on their own, they're going to have to look at academics, athletics, and opportunities, and they will make that decision for themselves. So I love the opportunity. Why not have the stepping stone to get involved with the kids, the coaches, the program, and then we'll see where it goes. And then also as a community, if we really want what's best for the kids, we got to let them excel at this level, so the rest will take care of itself. So again, just wanted to speak my support with the other 2 gentlemen, and as you continue to work on this topic, hopefully it'll work itself out. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brad.
We don't have any more.
Anyone else wishing to speak?
I just have a question, actually.
Come forward and please state your name.
Tracy Jellison. I have the diver. Is it actually an exception to the policy, or is it an interpretation of the policy, since it doesn't actually specify intermediate sports? It references IHSAA, which is at the high school level. So that's, I think, where everybody got a little confused, including your coaches, because we did do the due diligence as far as asking several times. I'm assuming the football teams went to the athletic director at that time, and everybody thought that the intermediate level, that wasn't part of the policy, is what the coach that I was dealing with actually thought you suddenly implemented a new policy. And I said, I don't think that's the case. But so I know you asked for the waiver. Are you looking at it as an exception if it doesn't specifically say intermediate sports? Because it's referencing high school sports, not your middle school.
It's been interpreted before.
Okay, and that was my question about the whole exception thing when you open that can.
That was the 3 years ago. It
Okay.
was interpreted, and we turned down, when it came to our level, we turned down the participation of a student from one of the parochial schools in town.
Okay, and I understand that I got the letter, I appreciate the letter. but is it really feasible that we would have our children in 2 schools? 3 academic classes. I mean, my son is a 7th grader. At what point in the day would he leave community Christian school to come to Richmond Public Schools to take 3 classes? Because I would entertain that, but I don't think that's a feasible solution at all.
We did
Maybe
have
if
the-
you offered a Bible class and, some of those classes, which is the reason I send my son at this level to community Christian, is for the Christian-based education until he gets a little older and can handle things on his own. So, if you want to offer a Bible class as an extracurricular or some prayer time or a chapel, then I might have entertained at this level for him to go to the Richmond Community Schools, but he will go to high school. I mean, he will go to Richmond Community High School, but I don't know how it's feasible for me to take him out of community Christian for 3 classes a day. Do you? I mean, do you know at what point?
Absolutely. We've worked that out.
You have worked that out?
We
Okay.
have worked that
Then
out.
maybe
We
I
made an
will-
offer for
Okay.
another student, and it would be an afternoon or a morning.
Okay,
And that could be done. The 3 classes could fit into that time period.
okay. So maybe that's what we will look at. Okay.
Could work with you on that.
You will, okay, and my last question for you, when you're looking at the policy, so the public will be invited to that work session? Because, I understand there were a lot of comments, online and things about it. I do not think my son is entitled to take the spot of another student, but if you're looking at your swim team program, there are not even enough participants that they just had a competition that we were at in Centerville, and there were several of the events that there were no Richmond students that competed. It was all Centerville. So I would like to be able to say that, look at it on a sport basis. I know you have some sports where you have too many kids trying out, and then you have some that you don't even have enough participation in. So those sports I would like to see maybe I don't know, special exceptions should be made, but if it gets to the level where someone would have the flexibility on your actual participation within your own school before you looked at outside students. Does that make sense? Kind of. Okay, so we will be able to come to the work session, Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak tonight? Good evening.
My name is Rhonda Harding. I am a Richmond resident. I actually live across the street from one of your PE teachers and one of your principals. So we are involved in the community, and I do have 3 children who have gone to community Christian school. I believe where you send your children to be educated is a personal family choice. And I just want to represent my support for the other ones. I did not know about the first board meeting, but my son is on Waterworks Swim Club. He was personally invited back in the summer to swim for the middle school. And if you're unaware of the swim program, the high school coach is the middle school coach. So he is seeing Waterworks Swim Club, which is ran by Family Fitness Work. It's publicly ran. It is a club sport. And he was invited to do that because Coach Brian, the high school coach, sees the importance of the feeder programs, just like the football statistics were given. And we just want to give our support to those of us who are taxpayers who are involved in the community. I've gone to church with some of you. I've done business with some of you and your spouses, and worked in political activities with some of you. So we're in the community, and we just want to be represented here at the school. I do have a daughter who benefits from Mrs. Lee. She loves Mrs. Lee. Speech with Mrs. Lee is considered a privilege. She is a wonderful speech therapist, and I want to give her credit for that. So we do appreciate the relationships we currently have. I know the IHSAA demands one class, and we were considering band. The 3, I just don't believe is possible with the transportation. We don't run buses. You wouldn't run a bus for us. So I just want to express my opinion about that being a little too difficult for some parents. But that's all I wanted to express, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? we are ready to move on to board reports, old business. And we're going to talk about our Finance Committee meeting that took place yesterday. Mr. Schleifer, do you want to begin that discussion?
Yeah, we had a short meeting.
Yeah.
It was, really, we only had 2 items on our agenda. The first item was a presentation that was set up by Mrs. Scalf and Dr. Borf on a presentation from
True Champion
True
Consulting.
Champions Consulting. It's a outfit that, or a company that has come together with a bunch of affiliate partners that come in and scour in a school corporation all costs that are non-employee centered. So in other words, they're not coming in and evaluating your employees, but they're coming in and taking a look at all the cost in your district, and it's everything. Anything that you, any check, as they explained, any check that you write to one person other than employee payroll for $1 is considered a vendor. So with that definition, they would like to come in and review, I believe, all of 2013's. I'm not exact sure of the timeline, but they like to look at 12 months of expenses and come back with some kind of potential cost savings. And there's no fee for the service. The fee and their service comes back out of the savings that they can generate, and it's 50% of the savings that they generate becomes their fee for a contractual period of time. They have, I think they said 60 different disciplines or areas that they look at, and some of the contracts go from 18 months up to 36 months in length. So we kind of left it that as a committee that we were interested in going to the next step, and that next step involves a non-disclosure statement that will be forwarded, if it hasn't already been forwarded, to Dr. Borf. Because we kind of come to the conclusion that if it's going to cost us nothing for them to look at our cost, what do we really have to lose? So, is there anything that you would like to add to that?
No, that is a pretty good estimation. They offer some services that currently we don't have the manpower to do here in-house, and there are requirements now and suggestions regarding vendor background checks that they can help provide us with that would be a tremendous help to my department, as well as the corporation as a whole, so that we all know that we have no problems with our vendors. They have a broad spectrum from anything like paper purchases to technology planning and things like that they offer. So they have a multitude of areas that they will look at, and we actually have the choice to pick which areas we would like them to proceed on. So we aren't at all locked into anything. I think that is a welcome thing to see, that we have choices in this, that you guys will be able to evaluate and really take a look at going in. If we want to continue any further work with them after this initial look through, it's completely your choice. And I think that's a really good benefit to seeing their product.
I would just, only thing I would add, guys did a very nice summary. The one piece that I was curious about or interested in was they have auditors who go in on a regular basis, if you enter into an agreement with them, and audit the services that you're getting, the billing, those kinds of things, with sort of a fine-tooth comb, so that they are catching if there's a mistake or a misrepresentation in the billing, so that they've been able to save people money just in that one little area too. So I thought that was interesting. And I know that I'm convinced that we probably don't have the time to do the type of auditing to the level that they are doing it.
They have quite a team that that would avail themselves to us, and it was it was pretty impressive, actually. So we'll have to see what the next step brings, but, you know, we're at a place where any cost savings that we can possibly get is, will benefit us, because we're at the place where our money isn't getting any better or bigger.
We can't raise the price.
Yeah.
The second item on our agenda was old business, and we really kind of run out of time to get into that because the other meeting took almost 2 hours. So, as we, Dr. Borf has had a conversation with Sodrel to let them know that we are interested in reopening the contract because of we're estimating that based on our property tax levy that we come in to pay for the Sodrel contract, that we will be just slightly short of $6,000 in collecting what it will cost for us to make their payments to them this year. Now, fortunately, we have a cash balance, so we won't realize all of that, but the effect of...
6,000?
Yes, 585,000, I think, was the total.
You said 6,000.
Oh, 600,000, I'm sorry. I guess that is a little different.
Little bit of a difference there.
Yeah,
Couple
600,000.
zeros there.
You know, with how much that we don't collect off the tax levy, the circuit breaker and other things that come into effect on that, we're starting the process. We're going to have to make some changes. We're trying to get a handle on our cost as well. We've asked Sodrel to start helping us try to identify some things that we can do, but we need to start, if we need to change, and Linda brought this up, we need to move fairly quickly and fairly deeply with this, because if it affects services, if we're going to end up having to change services for our clients, for our students, this is not something that we can spring on them the fall of next year quickly. So we need to, if we've got to change how we pick our students up, we need to get that out as soon as we can, so parents have time to adjust and we have time to work through some of those issues. So I think that's probably going to be our big issue over the next couple of months, is just figuring out what are our choices and what can we do, and
And it
I'm
does
sure you'll
have-
be hearing a lot about that.
And it does have the potential to impact our policy as well, I believe, so.
So if we're opening that up, will we be taking bids?
Well, not at this point. The opening up is that we've contacted them and said there's a clause in the contract that says due to legislative changes that we can open the contract or cancel it if required, because it's through no fault of theirs or no fault of ours. So we have the ability to open the contract, and right now we're looking for solutions within the partnership, because it isn't that they're misperforming and we don't want to continue
Right.
the partnership.
Right.
We've just got to figure out, is there still room for them, or what can we do to change to keep them there? And you know, because we have several options to look at, and hopefully between the two groups working together that we can come to some kind of solution that says, hey, we can solve the problem and here's what we're going to do.
I think Karen put it pretty succinctly yesterday when she said basically where we are is that we're going to have to show them what we have to work with. How much money do we have to put towards this transportation question, and ask them, are you able to work within that? I mean, that's not the deal they came on with originally, so they're going to have to examine that, and if we can go forward together, that's one avenue that we can pursue, and if we can't, then that's a whole different ballgame.
Right. Just to put it in perspective, their base, our certified tax levy is a little over 2.5 million, and then the amount that we're going to collect due to the circuit breaker and all that other stuff is 1.9 million. So there's the $600,000 hole right there. So, like I said, fortunately, fortunately, we're in a position that we don't have to make drastic changes right now because we have a cash balance.
And I think Dr. Borf has taken the initial step to contact Ron Cross so that he can begin the process with Sobral.
That's right.
With the contract and so forth. So that process is beginning, and so
Karen
Karen.
had something to say.
I just want to clarify, our cash balance will not be hit by $600,000 this year.
Right.
We did account for circuit breaker losses for a portion, and it will be hit with close to 300,000, but not the full 600, because we do realize some other areas of revenue in that fund, as well as we do try our best to accommodate for circuit breakers when we can, in amounts that we can. So I just wanted to clarify that going forward.
Yeah, the other revenue is about 250,000. So, which originally we thought was going to cover the management fee, because we have a management fee with Sodrel for them handling that. So there's a lot of, we're just scratching the surface now, so I'm sure there'll be a lot of information coming.
And just so you all know, we are meeting on the second Tuesday of the month at 1:30. So,
Is that open to all board members? I mean, can you?
We
can-
do advertise
It's an
that.
open meeting.
Okay.
So you're
so
all
second
welcome.
Tuesday of the month.
And you'll get notification. We found out that Susie wasn't,
No,
you get notification through board docs that the meeting is,
Oh, okay. I did see that.
I'm actually getting the notification. I just didn't recognize it for what it
Yeah.
was. I thought Board Docs was a repository of information. I didn't realize it was also
Okay.
notifying me of meetings.
Right.
So that was my misunderstanding. Newbie, I claim newbie mistake.
You have time for that.
you have 2 more months.
So, does anybody have any questions or any comments
Or just
Okay.
anything to add.
or anything to add? Yeah. Okay. Preview of our upcoming meeting.
Well, the two points that we will be focusing on at the next meeting, among other things, we'll have the budget issues, but we will be looking at that Garrison question. We'll be bringing that back. And the other piece that I would like to alert you to is that the REA, Kelly McDermott is back there, president of the REA, is working with us to put in place the recognition of teachers. And what we will be doing at the next meeting, has the teacher been notified? All right. Keith Morey will be our teacher, who will be the focus. And we will have a short video highlighting his work as a teacher and maybe some comments around his performance as a teacher by others. So, and what we're going to be doing is changing, we have to change our format just a bit of our board meeting, because right now, we are having videos for every board meeting. The teacher highlighted is going to have to, at least in the short run, take the place of the other video that normally comes at the very beginning, because we don't have the student personnel to help us produce more than one video per meeting. So on that second board meeting of the month where we highlight a teacher, that will take the place of the initial video that we have come accustomed to in the last few weeks.
I think that's a
I'd rather have the real face anyway.
good idea. Okay. Press conference. Anyone from the press? Well, we must have done a pretty good job then, if you don't have any questions. Okay. Anything else for the good of the cause? We are